I had to first realize what I was doing that was giving you a negative about me, that I didn't love
Perception, yeah.
you or had no care about you. That for me was hard. I'm like, oh, how could that even happen? But I had to look at myself. Well, how have I been responding? How have I been available? How have I nurtured this relationship? Especially we're family, and to me, a family is should be a close relationship. I know it's not for everybody, and I'm still working on some of those areas of my family that have kind of slipped away. But I desire to have that closeness again. So that was the first thing, and that was me, because I get to control how I respond to my family members, the people that God has put around my life, my friends, my neighbors, whatever. So that's just about me. I can't expect everyone else to change so that
Right.
I can like them or interact with them or whatever. So that was the first thing, was figuring out how I was putting off a vibe that was not approachable. And that was hard for me to realize. Hey, everybody. Welcome to season 4 of Splintered Grace. We're excited to be back with you guys. Just a quick reminder of who I am. My name is Tina Frank, and I'm a mature Christian who follows the teachings of Jesus Christ.
And I am Bonnie Violet, a trans, femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, identity doula, and digital chaplain.
While many family members are choosing to no longer speak to each other,
we have chosen to sit at the table and engage in an anti-cancel culture conversation
to find peace and restoration.
Splintered Grace is brought to you by a Queer Chaplain Productions, and each week we go live for our vodcast audience on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and you can listen to us pretty much immediately after our live show, about an hour after we begin. So it's about a 45-minute show, but give me 15 minutes to upload it to the podcast format.
Awesome. So, hey, we're going to start out with an amazing topic. Over the break we had and some of the conversations that we had, I got a lot of questions about what some of the letters mean. And I hope I'm saying that right, because I don't want to be offensive. So we're going to talk today about some of those meanings. We're talking about specifically the LGBTQ2IA plus acronyms and what goes along with those. So if you're like me, and I don't want to be offensive, but I want to understand everybody, I'm going to take notes. So I have my pen. So Bonnie, Violet, we appreciate you taking the time to share this, because we want to get to know you guys, you and everybody else around you, much better.
Great. Thanks so much, Tina. Thanks for popping us into that. Good morning to whoever is saying good morning to us in Facebook land. It's not showing me your name, but either way, I'm glad that you could join us this morning. So just kind of preface a little bit, LGBTQIA plus, kind of the letters that I put in the description. You may see a combination of these letters. You might see less of the same letters. You might even see a few more of the letters. And the LGBTQIA plus community is often lumped together, but it's a very unique and diverse group of people. And every letter is, it does mean a different, maybe like a different identifier. And it's not all the same. Like, for instance, there's gender, and there's sexuality or sex, or sexual orientation. So that's the whole thing. It's not like it's like, oh, these are all different kinds of sexual orientations, or these are all kinds of genders, or so it's kind of like a combination. Like, those things are kind of put together. So I think sometimes it can be confusing to folks who aren't kind of part of the LGBTQ IA plus community, and even at that, some folks might still have a hard time understanding the other if their gender is different
Gotcha.
than say, like just because a person is gay does not necessarily mean they're going to understand what it means to be trans. Though in kind of a heterosexual world, a non-LGBTQIA world, people might see it as one and the same.
Gotcha.
And
Did you say
sometimes
that it's okay to just use a few of the acronyms? So if I was to, I don't know, write something to someone or make an announcement of some kind, would I need to have all of those acronyms to be appropriate?
I think part of it is just, I guess I was prefacing that in the sense of you might only see like LGBT was commonly all you saw everywhere for a long time.
Right, that's true.
And then you started seeing the Q and the I and the 2 and the plus. And so any sort of, I guess, kind of delineation of those is they're probably trying to get to saying the whole group of folks.
Okay, okay.
But there is some historical context to that as well. And there also might be some specificity. For instance, I was so the 2 is for two spirit. And two spirit is something that I don't know a lot to speak on. So I would really encourage folks to kind of Google a little bit. But my understanding, like two spirit is it's an indigenous term. And I feel like it's in a term that was given, like it's not every tribe, not every group of people, they had what we might say are two spirit people, but they might have had different names for that within their own tribe and their own group of people. So I'm not going to speak too much on that, but I just want to bring up that if you see the 2, that's people are including the two spirit community. And, maybe there'll be a time that we can have someone share a little bit more with us on that. But also one of the things that we're going to talk a lot about is, or what I'm going to kind of refer folks to is to Google. I know that might sound like a lot for some folks and might sound a little simplistic for others. But I think if, being able to Google these terms and, reading up on what people say about it, there's great videos that explain things to you, as well as there's things that you can read. I know that it can be a little overwhelming because there's so many resources, and it can sometimes feel like, well, what's the right one, or which one's telling me the truth? Question. Or this one says this, and that one says this, and this one says that. And to some degree, I think that kind of speaks to the fact that there are so many like different narratives to all these types of folks and different understandings. And I would encourage you to read the resources of people, of the terms and definitions that are created by the people who are part of the community. So, to know that it's an LGBTQIA plus organization that's educating you on what the words mean, versus maybe somebody who's not part of community who's trying to talk about who we are. It's kind of in the sense of, I'm not familiar with the two spirit community, so like I could only go so far.
Right. But if I put into Google two spirits, then most of that information that I would need to know would come up so that I could discern what's going to be viable and what's not.
Yeah, you would be able to see like a lot of different things to kind of sift through. Also, I mean, it'd be great to look at, things that are made by two spirit folks talking about their situation. Again, two spirit is kind of like it's like an umbrella term. So there's a lot of pieces that are also part of the two spirit, community. So, and that was one of the things that and I think in a lot of ways of talking about the LGBTQIA plus community, in some ways it seems very maybe very basic or very simple. L is for lesbian, B is for bisexual, and you should be able to say, oh, lesbian is women who have sex or who are attracted to other women, or those sorts of things. However, not all lesbians identify the same way, and like you might have because it can get complicated really quick.
That's what I was worried about. It's like, oh my goodness. So the L is for lesbian though, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
And
now you're going to clarify between the different types. Is that what we're headed
well,
into that
yeah. So I mean,
kind
it's
of?
just I think the thing that's important about any of these sort of identifiers is that people tell you how they identify, and just like when I say, you say you're a Christian, it's important for me to not like in you telling me you're a Christian, you are telling me some things about you,
Mm-hmm.
like in that, but you're not telling me everything about you. You might be telling me that that you follow Christ, right? Like that should be like a basic that probably any person who identifies as Christian, they're Christ-like or they're working to being Christ-like, right? Um, but there's a ton of different ways on how people will attempt to do that or see, understand how it is to live that way. And so, yeah, so lesbian kind of in the basic idea is just same gendered women, so women who love women. And sexuality is not always just about like the sexual behavior. It's also about just attraction and connection and those sorts of things. So you can kind of um, maybe have feelings towards somebody that is sexual, but not actually have actual behavior. And then you have your own personal sexuality, right?
Right.
Um, so when we're talking about lesbians, that's talking about sexual orientation.
Okay. That was my next question.
Yes. So sexual orientation is kind of like who you are attracted to, who you have sex with, who you identify being in romantic relationship with. So that's a sexual orientation.
Okay.
Being gay is also a sexual orientation, and typically being gay, it just means like your same gendered loving. You might hear that as well, but gay often means men who love other men. Yeah, but sometimes lesbians will say they're gay too, because basically it just means that you love the same sex, the same
Okay.
gender, um, which is a whole nother kind of confusing thing. There is a difference between sex and gender as well. Sex is kind of like they say sex, well, and they don't even know that really. Um, I haven't thought about some of when I first grew up, when I first was teaching about like sex education when I was in my early 20s and stuff, they would say, sex is what's between your legs, whereas gender is what's between your ears. But
Okay.
yeah, that's what I've heard. I kind of feel like I want to like not really fully think that might not be like the best way to talk about it anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's that's
So
that's that's honest. I mean, if someone else has some comments out there that can guide us a little bit in that, then we're
yeah,
totally open for that. But I appreciate your bit of clarification because I'm coming from like far over here, and a lot of the people that I talk to are. So I'm hoping that this little bit of education that you're able to give us will help us out a little bit.
right. Well, and so yes, yes. So you have your lesbian, gay, bisexual is also an orientation.
It's a sexual orientation.
Yes,
Okay.
in the sense of like I have sex with both like my same gender and other gendered folks. Um, and then you have trans and non-binary folks who also we have sexual lives and um, sexual relationships as well. And so sometimes we don't fit directly into these LGB worlds because they are kind of based on a gender, right? That is either male or female. And
Well, let
so,
me ask you real quick. The T then is for trans.
mhm,
LGBT is trans. Okay. Go
yes.
ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Bonnie.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So bisexuality is basically the idea, and initially it was thinking that there was only like a man and a woman. So you were either a woman who likes a man and a woman, or you're a man who likes men and women. whether it's sexually, whether you're physically attracted or you're emotionally attracted or connected, in those ways. Again, sexuality isn't always behavior. So it's not always the act of sex, though sometimes it is, right? It does include that.
Okay.
So, and transness is all about gender, not about sexual orientation. So the T, or transgender, and transgender is an umbrella term for some people, and for others it might be how they identify. And that might mean that if they identify as transgender, that might mean that they were assigned male at birth and they've transitioned to female, or vice versa. That might be how somebody identifies. So transgender, trans, transsexual, those are all kind of similar terms. Transsexual is an older, it's a more older term for transgender, what we would call transgender people today. And there are some folks who still identify as transsexual.
So there's a difference between transsexual and transgender?
There could be.
Okay.
But not like in a very general way. No, they're kind of one and the same. I think that it's important to understand that if somebody identifies as transsexual versus transgender, they probably do have a little bit different understanding of their gender, and maybe their sexuality as well. Partially, I think that, I think one of the things to kind of understand too is that that's, I think, important to understand with when we're talking about anything, we're trying to explain something to somebody from their point of view. So if you're hearing words or you're coming to know words that you knew one way, or, for me, for instance, I identify as being trans, femme, gender, queer. So I'll say that I'm trans in kind of a more umbrella kind of term, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm just trans. I wouldn't say that I'm just, I don't know. I feel like I need to say more than just say I'm trans. For me to say that I'm trans means, because of my understanding of man and woman and kind of growing up in a very rural, just the era and the time that I grew up in, I didn't know much about trans people, or that gender could be more than just a man and woman, and not just such a very gender rolled kind of man and woman.
Hey y'all, it's me again, Bonnie Violet. I just wanted to take a second and thank my Patreon members. Patreon members are folks who contribute on a monthly basis anywhere from $3 to $150 a month to support the work of a queer chaplain. Big shout out to Victoria Thompson, Jason Brandt, Brandon Stanton, Kim Silva, Brandy McCarg, Randy Sandknott, Bob Kaiser, Joey Heckmeister, Violet Rhiannon, Gabriel, Jonathan, Petrick, and Todd Atkins Whitley. Thank you so much for your continued contributions. And if you're interested in joining the Patreon, just check the link in the description. Go to patreon.com/Bonnie Violet. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please
do. Hopefully it'll be something I hope it's okay. So you had said, and I know you said this isn't probably the best way to describe it, the difference between the sexuality and the gender. So when we're talking about this, so some people are obviously born male or female. So the gender transition, or the trans part, comes from the mindset, correct?
So people are either assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth. Some folks are identified as intersex. Some folks are born with multiple genitalia or parts of both, So folks in those situations back in the day, they might have chosen to remove certain body parts in order to choose one or the other. or there might not have been a way for that to happen. And so sometimes folks, and or there are also folks that they wouldn't necessarily surgically change any of that sort of thing. They just, they just identify as, intersex, and sometimes it's not always about like the outsides. It's sometimes the insides. You might have
Gotcha.
People who are assigned assigned female at birth, who might, later on you might find out that they have testes inside their, inside their body. And you might find people who are assigned male at birth who might have like some of the female what are thought to be female reproductive organs within them as well. And so those are more internal things that you're maybe not going to see, and maybe not even know about until later on in life. Because
when you say assigned, are you talking about when they're born at the hospital, someone
the doctor
assigns them?
says it's a boy
or
it's a girl.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you don't hear people say it's non-binary, it's transgender. Those are
It says it looks like that stuff can be not seeable. So
exactly.
They may not know. Okay.
Yeah, and that's why gender is kind of like it's what's in between your ears. It's like it's how you see and feel, like how you see yourself. And that's something that's in your head. It's not always your, like, I guess what your body, you know what I mean? Like your body could not, like, for instance, I have a penis, but I see myself as more feminine or as a female. So the gender aspect is my femininity, and like that's the gender. But I guess the sex is the fact that I was assigned male at birth.
I gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know it can get a little and then we all get to have our own experience with these sorts of things and our own understandings. And so that's why I think it's really important it is important for us to like Google and look up the general ideas of these words and what they mean. And then the more we come to learn about these letters and these words, and then we see how they intersect with the other worlds, because you have trans people who identify as trans. You have people who are trans who transitioned, say, from male to female, who identify as female. So they would not even connect to the idea that they were trans. So they would see themselves as a female, and they like other females. So that then they would be, they would be lesbian. Whereas other folks would not, they would just always identify as trans. Like, I think regardless of what I do with my body and how I continue to see myself, I think I'll always, I'll always identify as being trans, or identify as being non-cis. And so cis
that's another word. Is that one of the letters that we're talking about? Cis?
It's not actually.
Okay.
But I do think it's important to talk about. And so it's interesting. It just says Facebook user on what's coming across here. But this person is saying, and I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to read it out loud. They say, it is more than a mindset. The brain on scans actually lights up based on your sex that you are. You can be sex a man, but the brain lights up as woman, and so forth. Does that make sense? So it's Melinda. So thank you, Melinda. I'm not sure why it's not sharing that. So thank you, though. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely one way. Again, it's another way to kind of describe it that I think some people will understand that, and other people will maybe not quite, and they might need more information. So just like there's not any one narrative of being Christian or being straight or whatever, and a lot of like, do you identify as being straight, Tina?
Well, based on what I know that to mean, so I would say, yeah, I'm only attracted to men, more specifically my husband.
Right. Yeah. And so I think oftentimes people who are straight or heterosexual, they never really like identified themselves that way, because that was kind of thought to be like the norm. Like, that's just what you are. You don't question it. You don't, like, it's just who you are. Was that your experience?
Yeah, I never had any reason to question it. I never had any attractions outside of that.
Okay. Yeah. And so to bring up the term cisgender, and I think I just
Is
want to
that an
say
S or a C?
it's CIS. So
Okay.
just to kind of go back to that idea of like, for folks, I know that like, so this is for LGBTQ folks to be talking about this sort of stuff with folks who are not part of the community. It does take a lot of emotional labor. Like
Wow.
it's sometimes very hard to hear that people can't see your humanity, and that's not what they're saying, but that's oftentimes that you hear what you hear in the things that people say when they're trying to come to understand things. So for folks who are part of the LGBTQI community, it's just, if you're not one of us, you have no reason to think about sexual orientation or gender because you never needed to do that. Now, I would argue that I do think that women still dealt with the idea of like masculinity and femininity as you grew up. I know you've shared in previous episodes about kind of gender roles that were attached to expectations because you were, a woman versus a man. And so those sorts of things I think do impact, say, heterosexual or cisgendered people. But again, it's just I think that most folks don't really think about it until they have to, and then gender and sexuality feels like these foreign things to folks who haven't needed to kind of explore that. And even if I just go back to when I was trying to like understand who I was, because I grew up in a world in which I didn't see LGBTQ people, and if I did, I didn't know, and I didn't, you know what I mean? It just wasn't talked about, and so there was
Yeah.
this kind of like feeling of figuring it out on my own, even though I was already that. I just didn't know how to explain who I was, and you know what I mean, and how I was. And that's something that I've just come to understand more of the more that I've lived my life. So I know we are starting to talk about cisgender. So cisgender is CIS, which basically just means same. So it's just the idea of like your gender matches the sex you were assigned at birth. So you were assigned female and you see yourself as a female. So you're cisgendered.
Okay.
You're not transgender, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
And so then that's the L, the G, the B, the T. Under trans, also though, there's non-binary. Some non-binary folks will identify as trans, some will not. Non-binary just means that I'm not male or female. For some folks, they might say, I'm kind of male, I'm kind of female, or like I'm part male, I'm part female. Some people might say I'm not either. Like I don't identify with either. I'm just kind of in this other space. So it's kind of just different people's understanding. As some people have spent more time kind of thinking about this, and they might think like, oh, well, they might have a little bit more words to describe beyond being non-binary. They might be able to, like I say trans femme because I feel like I'm more on the trans femme side than say like a masculine side.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions so far? Or things that are coming up for you? Or in the audience either?
Yeah. I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't want to be upsetting for you or anybody, but it seems a lot of this is based on your sexual preferences versus on, okay. So that's what I'm hearing. So I figure I'm hearing something different. So based how you're feeling one way or the other is based on what, not just who you're attracted to then. So what gives someone that idea? Just because I'm born biologically and given this assigned this gender.
You were assigned, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what, besides other than my physical attractions to other people, what other signs would I look for to say that my assignment might be not right, inappropriate?
So you're kind of talking about two different things.
Oh, okay.
So gender is more about like gender does not include like sex. It's not like who you are attracted to. It's how you see yourself in the world, how you identify. It informs, like male, female, trans, non-binary, bigender, trigender, demisex, those sorts of things. Then when you get into where sexuality is more about who you're attracted to. So gender might be more about you, whereas sexuality is about you too, right? Like you do have your own sexuality without having sex. And there are folks who are asexual who do not, have sex with other people or are not drawn to have sex with other people. And again, there's lots of variations of being asexual. So sexuality is also for you, but oftentimes it can involve other people, whereas
that
gender
helps me a lot. Thank you, because that helps me a lot.
No problem. The Q can be referred to as, I've heard it been questioning. So it might be somebody who's questioning their gender or their sexual orientation. Q is also sometimes queer. And so queer for some people could be about their gender or their sexual orientation, or it could be a combination of. I identify as queer. And some folks, like, queer is a very, it can be a very kind of polarizing term. Queer is a slur. It's been a not kind way to talk about gays and lesbians and trans people in the past. And so there's a very much older generation who do not identify with being called queer and would find it very offensive and kind of are challenged with the fact that there are so many young kids like myself and younger who love to identify as queer. So like for me, I identify as queer, and to me, my queerness is my sexual orientation, meaning that it's not heterosexual. It's queer. It's not heterosexual, and it's not like, I'll just leave it at that. It's not heterosexual, so it's queer. But I also think my gender is not cis, so it's queer. I also think that queer for me is the way that I see myself in the world and the way that the world sees me. So I seem odd or just outside of the norm of the world, and that's where I believe God wants me to be and creates me to be, and I believe that's where God does the work with me, and does the work with, I think, healing the world in the way that I'm brought to be a part of, like creating the kingdom of God on earth. And so that's just like, for me, like, so queer it's also my politics. It's, it's all those sorts of things for me. It's all wrapped in. But you might just have like somebody who's a gay man who says I'm a gay man, and so that makes me queer. And that doesn't mean that my politics, it could be like, I'm queer, that means I'm a gay man. I happen to be Republican and I blah, blah, blah. But the queerness is the fact that I'm gay. For others, it might be more than that. So again, it's just kind of like, that's one of the challenges I think about talking about some of this stuff, is that there is some, I guess, simplicity behind it, but like with everything, there's nuance, right? And so one of the things that I encourage folks to do, it's like, you can learn about the letters, and I think it's important to stay up on them, because I think we've learned better about how to explain as time has passed. So, like for instance, I did a lot of talking about LGBTQ-ness before I saw myself as a trans person. And now that I've been living as a trans person, I'm still kind of coming to understand some of these things, because I never had to really think about, or I never would think about what it meant to be trans when I was just a gay dude, because of my own internalized transphobia. Because as a person who was assigned male at birth and grew up, I was attacked because of my femininity. And and I thought it was because I was gay, not because I was trans. And maybe it was both, because maybe I was just gay and now I'm trans, or maybe I've always been, but those sorts of things can kind of I don't remember quite exactly why I was going with that, but those can come across as two different things, right?
Gotcha.
And so it seemed more okay to be gay than to be trans in my understanding. And I was still trying to figure out myself, and I was confused. And so I didn't want other people to be confused about my confusion either.
Gotcha.
If that makes, I mean, you know what it's like to grow older and come to understand yourself differently and have one identity and understanding of yourself, and then life happens, or you learn something new and you're like, oh wait, that doesn't fit anymore. Can you think of anything for you that comes to mind that's a similar experience when you hear that?
I can't. I mean, knowing who I am was always part of my way to interact.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so knowing I've never questioned my gender, my biological male or female. I've never had a desire to question that. So for me, the only changes that I've pursued or desired were spiritual changes, where I can be closer to what I felt was my purpose and peace. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, that's been a spiritual journey, not necessarily a physical journey of my life. Does that make sense?
I do. I understand what you're saying, yes. And
Okay.
I think that's important for, I think, people when understanding when you are, I think a lot of the times we are challenged to same our experience with folks who are different from us. And I think it's really important for us to, I know a big part of my beginnings was to look for the sameness in someone. And I think the more I can see that we're different and we have different experiences, the better I am
Mm-hmm.
in my understanding and being in relationship with someone else. Because and so I think that's great that you're not like that. You can see that these are, I guess, different sorts of situations.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I don't consider myself the same as anybody. Just because I have the same anatomy, um, I'm very unique. I'm very
right.
unique in the way I think. I'm very unique in how I live my life, how I interact with people. But I've never had a moment where I've questioned. And I mean, I've had moments where I haven't gotten along with people for sure, or
Right.
someone would say something to me that would challenge the path that I chose um, uh, for my life, knowing that I was trying to move forward. But nothing that I couldn't actually just adjust or disassociate. I've disassociated with people in my life who have thought, okay, so you're not, um, you're trying to make me like you. I don't want to be like you in the spiritual sense or in the motivation
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
And
sorry, I feel like I'm not making any sense at all.
no, I get it. And I think there is some like physical aspects, and I think um, what I would like to challenge, or what I would like to also be able to say in this, is that our experience with our bodies, with our physical, with our gender, with our sexuality, with our sexual orientation, like that is part of our spirituality as well. Like our spirit and our spirituality, and God is a part of that. And I think oftentimes it's troubling, or I've been challenged when it's thought that these things aren't related. You know, my understand like my transness and me living into my trans identity is a direct result of me living a spiritual life and my constant seeking and connection with, with a God, with a higher power, with the, you know what I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
creator. Like though that sort of connection and spiritual seeking has impacted my physical body. It's in fact it impacted my mind. It's impacted so many things about me. And I think it's so damaging. And that's why I like to do work as a queer chaplain, is to that is loss of when we identify, when our identity changes, when we see ourselves differently. We die and then we live again, right? That's a very biblical thing. You have to die in order to, was it, you have to, like, it's in dying that we receive eternal life. Is that right? So it's like in dying.
Yeah, dying to self. It
Right,
says
in dying to
specifically.
self, which is really around, I think, identities and beliefs. When we come to see or understand something different than our previous understanding, that is a death. That can be a loss in our, we can experience that as a loss, but it's also a birth. And I think oftentimes when that identity change or that death is labeled with gay, lesbian, bi, transgender, any of those sorts of things, then somehow we feel like that is not a spiritual experience. It actually might even be an anti-spiritual experience. And for me, I feel like that's where it becomes harmful or can become harmful for people when it doesn't need to be. When coming to understand yourself more and coming to understand how you are created and were created to be, like that's a beautiful and amazing thing to happen. And that's that's a God thing. That's how creation works. And so it's just like, I don't know. I just feel like for so long we've been not allowed to identify as spiritual and all these sorts of things. And I think that's something that's sad. I'm seeing it happen less and less, but that when we feel like it separates us, then it leaves big hole. Like for me, it left a huge hole in my heart. I lost community. I lost a sense of myself, and that led to drug use and sexual assaults and violence and all these sorts of things that kind of came my way because I think in a lot of ways I just wasn't. Life happens sometimes, but I do feel like it's a big part of that is that I felt like I was not worthy of God anymore because of those things, and that's just a lie.
You're right. That is a lie.
Yeah. And in that, it built up all this shame and this secrecy and then all this division and separation from parts of myself and you and, like literally you, but also, just like people out in the world and that. And so,
you're exactly right. That's the power that a lie can carry in our lives. And so we want to try not to be liars or to live out the lie. So, yeah.
Agreed. So we are we are running out of time here.
We still have letters left.
Well, I think we have the I and the A, which are intersex and asexual. I did bring those up a bit out of order. One of the things that I do want to, again, disclaimer is like, I am not the representative or the speaker for the LGBTQIA, plus community. I can only share my experience and my understanding of my experience and how that might relate to others. So there is so much I didn't say today, and I don't want anyone to think that I was attempting. I didn't say enough about intersex. I didn't say enough about asexuality. I don't know a lot about that, and I haven't spent a deep amount of time coming to understand. Again, I've Googled it or I've learned about it a little bit, but I don't feel like I'm comfortable enough to speak about it on a public platform.
Gotcha.
And I just want to encourage people to Google is free. And there are a lot of really great resources out there. If you're concerned about trusting the resource, just look to see if it's created by the community who it's about, make sure that it's queer stories and like that it's being written by folks who are part of the community. A great way that I learn as well too is to watch. I like to watch things. So there's films you can watch, there's YouTube videos you can watch. I think it's been helpful for me too to even watch movies about groups. Like I've learned a lot about my transness and my queerness by watching movies about trans people and gay and lesbian people. A person living with HIV, watching old HIV films have been really powerful and helpful for me too in understanding more of myself. And, I've learned about other racial groups and other just people who are different from myself in similar ways, reading their biographies or watching movies about them, those sorts of things. And those folks who are doing that, they're inviting you into that experience. I know sometimes it can feel a little like, I don't know, like you're taking or you're going into somebody else's space. And I think that's something to be really mindful of. And we'll talk about that next week. We're going to talk about allyship and how can we be allies to people who are different from us. We'll talk specifically around LGBTQ2IA plusness, but we'll be talking about just allyship in general. So we'd love to hear from you if you have questions, thoughts, or comments about today's episode, as well as next week when we're back here. Did you have anything you'd like to say before we go?
No, I appreciate you opening up and sharing with us and giving us a bit of a foundation to start from, to gain some more understanding. So as we hear these terms, hopefully it'll help us and maybe help us to ask more questions, because I'm a firm believer that asking questions is the opportunity to learn and understand about the people that we're around or the situations that we face.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone who joined us live. As we said at the beginning of the show, we are going to be live every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. in Phoenix. That's Mountain Time right now, 9 a.m. in the Pacific Standard Time, 10 a.m. in Central, and 11 a.m. in Eastern. If you're outside of any of those time zones, I'm sorry, you'll have to
I'm impressed you remembered all of those.
You'll have to kind of check it out. I've gotten a lot better, at least with the 4 time zones in the U.S., with just all the traveling and that I'm doing.
I'm grateful I only have to worry about one.
Oh, right. The
and
one
it
that
never
you're currently
changes.
in.
That's right. It never changes.
Yes. So also to learn more about Splintered Grace and a Queer Chaplain, you can check out the links in the description of the video or the podcast that you're listening to. Queer Chaplain is, I guess it's something it's my ministry that I've been working on for a few years now, and it's left my work 18 months ago to really pursue. And we have a Queer Chaplain does Splintered Grace podcast. We also do a drag and spirituality series where we interview drag queens and drag kings and other artists and lace their narratives with a spiritual thread. I do the same series with trans individuals and talk about and help them lace their narrative with a spiritual thread. We do groups and workshops on lacing your narrative with a spiritual thread. And I'm working on a spiritual drag con, and this stuff is beginning to happen and will continue to happen as I get your support, people's both support financially, but also in sponsorships. I've had wonderful people that have let me come stay with them and introduced me to folks to interview and to collaborate with. So we do have a Patreon that again, the links are in the description, and I can go ahead and put it in the banner now, that you could, if you wanted to try to support the work of Splintered Grace and a Queer Chaplain. I would like to take a moment to thank Casey, Mark, Todd, Jonathan, Gabriel, Jeff, Jeffrey, Violet, and Joey, who are or have been Patreon members in the past. The Patreon link is again in the description. It's just patreon.com/Bonnie Violet. And there you could sign up to contribute monthly at $3 or $7 or $10 or $100, whatever it is that you feel like you could contribute would be super, super helpful in continuing not only this podcast, but some of the work that I guess spins from it. I think that's all I wanted to share today. So we'll see you all next week. Do you want to join me in saying goodbye, Tina?
Bye, everybody. Have a great week.
Bye-bye. Splintered Grace podcast is brought to you by a Queer Chaplain. Follow us on all of our social media, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at a Queer Chaplain. Listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe,
comment, like, and share. Feel free to tip us at Venmo, Bonnie Violet, and support monthly on Patreon. The song is original by Stephen Sandnoff, The Chasm Between Us. Rest in peace, Stephen. Hey, how's it going? Bonnie Violet here. I'm a trans femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, and digital chaplain. And in case you didn't know, I could really use your support. Engage, rate, subscribe, follow, comment, share this episode, book me to keynote, panel, guest on your show, or officiate your wedding or memorial, in or out of drag, collaborate, join the team, be a guest, make a pitch, sponsor an episode, join my Patreon, send me a tip on Venmo or PayPal. Just do something. Thank you so much for your continued support. Check out the links in the description.